Welcome to Cooking with Bobbi Jo. Today I'm going to show you how I make my pinto beans and cornbread with that nice crispiness on the outside of the cornbread. I soak my beans overnight. I store my beans in mason jars with an oxygen absorber inside to keep them fresher longer. I'm just going to be making 1 jar of beans today. If you have a larger crowd to feed, you may want to use more. I'm going to pour them out into this bowl. And you want to make sure that the bowl is twice as big or even more than the amount of beans because the beans will swell up overnight. You want to check your beans for bad beans, rocks, and other things that may have gotten in the bag. And yes, you will sometimes find rocks in your bag of beans. You can do this whatever way works for you. Me, I pour the beans into a strainer. Then I go through them a handful at a time. Okay, so I've been through the jar of beans and this is what I found in my beans. Now I'm going to pour the beans back into the strainer and I'm going to rinse out the bowl. Rinse the beans a few times in the strainer, tossing them around, making sure I'm getting them rinsed well. Then I'm going to pour those back into the bowl. Then I cover them with water. You want more water than beans because these beans are going to get a lot bigger as they absorb the water. I put a gallon of water over at this jar of beans. I'd rather have too much water than not enough. Then all you do is cover them and let them soak overnight. Okay, mine's soaked until about noon the next day. Here are my beans. I'm going to cook mine in my Dutch oven. I usually do this in a crock pot, but I need to invest in a bigger crock pot for us. The ham bone won't fit in my medium-sized crock pot. I did a video on Monday showing how I froze my ham bone that I cut into several pieces for soups and beans. I took this ham bone out of the freezer last night and it's been thawing in the fridge. I'm going to turn the heat on medium and I'm going to add in the ham bone. This bone still has plenty of bits and pieces of ham on it, so it will flavor those beans up nicely. I then rinse my beans one more time and put those in the pot. Then add 4 cups of chicken broth and 4 cups of water. You want the beans to be covered with liquid. If you don't have chicken broth, you can use just water. I find chicken broth gives it a better flavor. Then I add in a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I know a lot of people say don't salt your beans while they're cooking because the salt will change the texture, but I like my beans to have a little form, so a little salt helps with that. If you like your beans falling apart and kind of mushy, then don't add the salt. You want to heat until it starts to boil, then reduce to low and simmer for a few hours, and I actually cook mine all day on low. If you're using a crock pot, do the exact same thing, except keep it on low all day. I usually add onion, garlic, and hot pepper flakes to mine, but these will be shared with my in-laws, so I'm keeping them plain. That way they can season them however they like. Okay, my in-laws stopped by and I gave them a big bowl of these, and I usually thicken up the broth before serving the beans, but I didn't think about it before I dipped these out. So now that they've got theirs, I'm going to season ours up. I'm going to add some black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. And I'll just add hot sauce to mine in the bowl to give it a little heat. And look at that meat falling off the bone. Nothing like ham pieces in a bowl of beans. I'm not going to add extra salt. Some people may want extra salt. The ham and the chicken broth have plenty in it for me. Now that all the ham pieces are off the bone, I'm going to remove the bone from the pot. And if you want your broth to be a little thicker, then mix together 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of water. Mix it together until the cornstarch is dissolved and pour it into the beans. You want to mix all that together well and bring it to a boil and it'll thicken up. The more beans you use, the thicker it will be naturally. I don't want mine too thick because the cornbread will absorb the liquid once crumbled into the bowl of beans. And that's all there is to making a pot of pinto beans. Now let's move on to the cornbread. Alright, now let's make some cornbread. Look at those crispy edges in the bottom. If you want thinner cornbread, use a larger cast iron. Thicker, use a smaller cast iron. And everyone I tell you has an opinion on the right way to make cornbread. This is how I make my cornbread. That doesn't mean it's the right way, it's the right way for us. I do not put sugar in my cornbread. If you are looking for a sweet cake-like cornbread, then keep on searching. There are plenty of recipes out there to try. I like having a slice of leftover cornbread for breakfast sometimes with a little honey over it. I don't put sugar in the cornbread, but I may have a little sweetness on top of it. If you're looking for a crispy slice of cornbread that isn't sweet, then this is the recipe for you. I'm going to start out by preheating the oven to 450 degrees. Then I place 2 scoops of bacon grease in a cast iron skillet. I'm going to place that in the oven while I get the batter ready. In a mixing bowl, add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 1/4 cups of yellow cornmeal, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, and mix all of that together. Then add in 1 egg, 1 cup of buttermilk, and 1/3 cup of oil, and mix that all together. If you don't have buttermilk, you can add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice or 1 tablespoon of vinegar to a cup of milk. Stir it together and let it sit for a couple of minutes and it will be thick like buttermilk. I use lemon juice and whole milk in this recipe as a buttermilk substitute, and it works great every time. Pull the skillet out of the oven and it will be smoking, and that is okay. Pour your batter in and look at it sizzle. That hot skillet sizzling like that's going to make the edges and the bottom of your cornbread crispy, and the bacon grease will give it a really good flavor too. Diane says it's time for her to eat. Hear her back there barking. Put it back in the oven and bake for about 20 to 25 minutes until it's golden brown. You can insert a toothpick in. If it comes out clean, then it's good, but usually if it's golden brown, it's ready to come out. Once it's done, pull it out of the oven and butter it up. Slice and enjoy. This is so good with a bowl of pinto beans. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to tune in on Friday for another episode of the Lake Hill City Birds. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I hope y'all have a very blessed day.